pay here. Tell me where to start.
Okay. What is up, everybody? I'm Josh Garcia. Welcome to the Revival Motoring YouTube channel. And today I'm here with one of my favorite people and favorite cars, Mr. Tobias Aldrich.
Salutations, folks.
We are going to talk about this car and probably another car, but this is his 1981 Jetta Coupe. Toby, please, how long have you had this car, just to start?
I have had this car since 2001. That's right, it's old enough to drink now.
I know the backstory, but for those who may not, where did you find this car?
Well, a very brief synopsis. I was living in Vermont at the time, and I was painting houses, and it was just on the side of the road back in the day of where people would just creep onto someone's property and poke around. Can you imagine doing that now? But it was on someone's property, had a Rabbit GTI as well, and this shell was there, and I thought, oh, that's cool. You don't see the two-door variant very often. So I left him a note. This was pre-phone service there, and he gave me a call, and we struck a deal for $50. But it didn't look anything like this, that's for sure. It was just a rolling shell that he was robbing parts out of for his Rabbit GTI, and I put a milk crate in it, and my friend helped me tow it home with a strap in his Tacoma. Or no, it wasn't even a Tacoma at the time. I think it was just the Toyota truck, whatever they call it. Anyway, we towed it home, and it was just going to be a winter vehicle. So I also purchased a separate Rabbit GTI at the time and put the drivetrain in it, which is an upgrade from this because this came with a lesser engine than a Rabbit GTI at the time. I also immediately put in a Mark II dash because he had taken the dash out to put into his Rabbit GTI because the Jetta dash was more desirable at the time. So Mark IIs were at my disposal at the time at the junkyard. That's when there was plenty of Mark IIs in Vermont at the junkyard. It became my winter car for the first winter, and then it progressed into, wow, this shell's pretty good. How about we paint it? So my great friend Aaron at the time helped me paint it Alpine white, and we decided to add a little blue pearl into the paint, and it was a driveway job. It was a paved driveway in a rural neighborhood similar to this, and he and his brothers and I, there was about 12 Volkswagens there. I think all the neighbors hated us, but it got the job done. He helped me prep it all. We selected some other panels, and we sprayed it right in the driveway. And right as we were spraying the clear coat, the neighbor decided to mow the lawn. I remember racing over to beg him to stop.
Oh, God.
And he didn't care because he didn't like us anyway because of what we were doing, which I now understand in retrospect, given everything about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it led to a lot of wet sanding. And then eventually a few years later, I'm gonna cut through the timeline, I moved to Rhode Island.
When did you put the 2-liter in?
After I moved to Rhode Island. So okay. It was a Rabbit GTI engine for about 4 years, and I did the Dagball Rally in it with the Rabbit GTI drivetrain, which ran great, but the gear ratios and rubber band tires at the time, I had ATS cups with some real ditch finders on them. In 2005, I did 2 years of the Dagball Rally, and trying to keep up with all the dub Audi guys was quite the feat. I was screaming at 5,500 RPMs on the highway, just trying to keep up with everyone. But it did it fine, just I had a little paranoia that it was gonna be a little too much. 5,500 RPMs for 8 hours is a lot. But
it's asking
it's fine. So I was at Yarrow Sport then eventually in Rhode Island, and I wanted to do, at the time, the standard, what most people do in a Mark I, a 2-liter 16 valve with Weber 45 carbs. And Jesse, shout to Jesse, and Yarrow convinced me to do an ABA swap, and that was late 2005. All right, so In 2005, after I decided not to do the 16 valve with the carbs, to have a more usable engine, and I decided to go with the black format, the Panda format. That's when I started. I took out the original engine and I started shaving the bay. But I wanted to do an OEM plus thing. A lot of people at the time were doing the bathtub engine bay, where they just made, especially in these cars, they'd make flat panels here and they'd lose this accordion bumper character. This is one of my favorite parts of a Mark 1. That gives a lot of character, even the old CIS dent. All the lines, people would shave it all, and I wanted to just have it look this OEM plus look. So even though it looks fairly plain, there's been over 100 holes shaved in the engine bay, including one of my favorites, which was there's usually 4 studs here that hold the hood release, and down across the rad support, a lot of people just leave that flat part that the radiator sits on. There's about 20 holes in there. So I made a whole panel that went across there, and that was fantastic. I really enjoyed that. I love grunt work. And then, yeah, hundreds and hundreds of hours at the sandblast machine, coating, doing all the things with the powder coat and the Pour 15. The engine head and transmission are POR 15 engine paint. I've never had any flake off, even around the exhaust manifold. Just like anything, it's all in the prep. So at that time, it then got into PVW magazine, which blew my mind that they would want my heap of garbage in there. But at the time, there was one other car that had a black engine theme in Europe, a silver Golf that was in Golf Plus magazine. And it was finished right around the same time. I'd never spoken to the guy. It was just a funny coincidence that we did a similar thing. He did it with a G60 though. A cooler drivetrain for sure. Then I kind of did the circuit, so to speak, for about 4 years, where it was totally consumed my life after that. That's when I was in my heyday, going around talking to everyone, driving all over the East Coast, up and down, every weekend, every waking moment. It's all I cared about. And that's when it got the most use. But then my driveway paint job with my friends started to show its age a little, especially the bottom of the fenders, the rear deck lid, the rockers. It was starting to show its age. So I started to collect parts. Over 2 years, I collected body panels and rocker panels and fenders and just all the items that were needed. And I brought it to my great friend Jody Doyle, one of my best friends ever. He was the best man in my wedding. He also has a Mark 1 Jetta in Vermont, and we decided with his help to paint the car. So I would go up on the weekends 5 hours away. I don't know what I was thinking at the time, in 2010, and miraculously in only 3 months after work and on weekends, we completely revamped the car, including respraying the engine bay, new rockers, new rear arches, all these body panels, full color change inside and out in just 3 months to this Inari Silver, which I drove my wife Danielle crazy with trying to pick at the time. I had about 50 different spray outs. I think I was down to Porsche Riviera Blue, which is a wild color. I'm glad I didn't do it. They don't seem to work well on sedans. In my reviewing at the time, it seemed like hatchbacks you can get away with a much more drastic color without it looking tacky. Do you agree, Josh?
I do actually.
Something about the lines of a sedan.
Because it's more.
You can't do a vivid color. A hatchback you can get a lot more vibrant, especially in a car that's very square. And I'm very glad I chose this metallic color. I'm still pleased with it 12 years later. The paint has held up fantastic. My friend Jody did a great job, and I learned a lot from him about the right way to do body work when I went up there. And then since then, shortly after that, I also went through a number of sets of wheels. I'd gotten some custom image wheels from the UK. They were 14-inch by wide, and the car was really low, and I was destroying the underside of it because the smaller wheel, you had to put the car lower to reduce the wheel gap. You can't have it wheel gap. So I was destroying the car, and eventually I sold them, and I caved into the standard RS. But I decided to do something very different with the 34-hole center. Now there's no 34 hole center 4 on 100 RSs. There are 16-inch RS 003 if you get nerdy, but they're an upsized lipped. I never liked the upsized lip. The massive center gives it more impact, and I wanted that Porsche fitment because the profile of the face is very flat. Some of them have a very convex appearance, and I just don't like that, which led to a number of other problems that we'll get to down the road. But I've gone through a few versions of these. I started with the skinny with the ditch finders, and then eventually I didn't like how it rode or looked from the front or back, so it turned into going the Big Ron style. Mark 1 people would know the famous Big Ron, and now they're 16 by 8 and 9 with some pretty beefy tires. They're 215s in the back, so it's a pretty wide tire in a car this big. But to achieve that, I had to narrow the rear beam, and I had to narrow the front control arms, axles, and tie rods, all to, it's like a loose tubbing on a unibody car. And that's what it took to allow to put the wider wheels and tires on. But it rides and drives much better now, and I think they fill out the wheel wells very well. It's kind of a thing that people don't notice, but I like that. The less is more. Less is more.
Is it safe to say that you finally, like, this is the best it's driven?
Yes, this is the best it has driven since I've had it, because it's a little bit higher off the ground with the bigger wheels, and it also has these wild H&R ultra deep 160 millimeter coilovers that are only a quarter of the way down, so it rides very well. With all the things done, this is the best it's driven. I still have over 2 inches of ground clearance now, versus when I had the 14s, I had less than an inch.
Yep.
So it's still usable. Don't get me wrong, it rides very firm and abrupt.
Right.
And I have all the sway bars and strut bars, so it handles like a go-kart still, but it's a compromise from the much smaller wheels. And also the much smaller wheels, it started to get harder and harder to find tires, because obviously new cars, nobody has 14s, even 16s now, it's hard to find tires, but that's another story.
Right.
And then each year I've evolved. Eventually I put in the half-pitch pop-outs. If you're a Mark 1 person or a Mark 2 person, you'd know what they are, because these come with a standard sealed quarter vent window, but these open so you get a little more airflow. It's actually more for the nerd factor. It does help a little, but also the Euro bumpers, we didn't get these in America. This is something that you have to import from Europe, as well as the headlights and grille. The US cars came with, you'd call them a diving board. They weighed 5 times as much and they came out 4 inches more. And the US spec Jettas had 4 headlights, 2 on each side, that you could see about 5 feet. So this is the European version. Also, initially when I'd painted it, Jettas are notorious. This front valance is typically totally bent and rolled over just from people driving up to a curb.
Yep.
So my good friend Alistair in Vermont, who's a tin knocker, made one custom for me to put on. And when we painted it green, that was one of the things we did. Sorry, I'd forgotten that before. But many other small details shaved. Again, it was to try to make things look stock that you don't notice unless you know what you're looking at.
Yep.
I always thought a good mod is one that people don't notice. That probably sounds weird, but if you don't notice it, it looks like it belongs. At least that's been the train of thought with this particular theme. All right, so also at some point in the timeline, which I forget when, I put in a Digifiz gauge cluster. Now that is one of a Mark II thing that people do, and because I have the Mark II dash, now this cluster only came in certain Mark IIs in 88 to 90 and potentially a Scirocco 16 valve in Europe. It was a dealer option. They didn't sell many of them, but it's very cool. It's kind of like a night rider thing. It takes a few seconds to calibrate here, but at night it's fantastic. It's in liters, the fuel. This, we can see the tachometer here go up when so it's pretty cool, and it's in kilometers an hour. And there's all sorts of little things that you can keep trick lobs and an MFA and whatnot. I've also retained the full HVAC because it's important to be able to defrost the windshield. And on those cooler fall nights, it's definitely nice. It extends the use time each year, because in the climate where Josh and I live here, it's maybe 7 months maximum that you get to utilize a play car without salt and snow. And really the salt.
And some of those months flip a coin of what you're gonna get.
Right, morning, 7 month maximum, we should say, yeah. 7 month maximum. Also with that in mind, all sorts of little different Mark II doodads and trinkets, just that come in different oddball Mark IIs. These are cool because they have a bow style headliner. A lot of old American cars and whatnot do. US Rabbit GTIs just have a Mark II style headliner that's not as exciting. Also, I'm kind of jumping all over now. When I did the full repaint with my friend Jody, I got every single gasket to the car brand new, and I did all the chrome locking hardware in the hood, hatch, doors, door strikers, everything. That kind of all made sense to do with the paint job to refresh all that stuff. And then the past few years, I've also gotten more into nerdier details. At one point early on, it was cool to remove all stickers, but now I've added back, take a look there. That's some nerd thing I'm kind of excited about. All the OEM stickers, I went and got all the correct numbers and had these custom made for the car. So that's making it more of a OEM plus example. And
one of the latest bigger things that you did, or in the past year or year-ish, you redid the whole interior carpet and all that?
Oh, yes, that's right. I forgot that one. I had rewired it 2 years ago to CE2, which is a late Mark II and Mark III wiring. So the whole car tip to tail, I rewired it and fixed a lot of my sins from 2005. Just more time, experience, and better products. So the wiring's much better than it was. And now if I ever want to do a different power plant, it should be much easier to plug it in versus the hobnob of 4 harnesses that I had in there. It worked, but it just wasn't ideal.
Yeah.
Last year, I took out the carpet. It was a $100 carpet from Stock Interiors in 2003 that I had just glued down to the floor, and it was not very good. So I got one from Newton in the UK, which led to stripping the floors completely, pour 15ing them. It led to all summer basically redoing the floors, the carpet, and a bunch of other little doodad inside.
A bunch of Dynamat.
Once you open the thing, yes, also Dynamat. So it's something no one will ever notice, but it did deaden the sound a lot, and it does feel good to rub your hand over that carpet. So yeah, pretty much every single nut and bolt over the car. There's not a single thing that hasn't been touched, rebuilt, modified. But again, it's been a slow process over 21 years. A lot of the things that I've done now each year, nobody ever notices, but that doesn't matter. The refinement process is a lifetime. You can build a car and get a lot of attention in a year or two, but it takes a long time to refine and work out all the details so everything works just so.
So the car is at this point now, there's always things to be refined and tinker with. What's something you want to change currently?
So the next thing on the list, so to speak, is the trunk. Now, Jetta trunks are very bland. They're very utilitarian. They didn't even have panels. It was just open to the body and the sides and the back. They just had a piece of carpet, and the strut towers were visible. Everything was. So a long time ago, I made some cheap panels with masonite and some cheap Joanne fabric, and they fell apart. They just, 20 years of use, they just disintegrated. So last year I threw them in the trash without really a plan. But when I got the carpet, I also asked them to send me a giant roll of the exact same fabric for continuity, of course. And I haven't gotten to it yet, but I want to make a false floor just so it's level with access to the battery, because the battery and some relays are in the back. And just some basic panels. I even want to carpet the strut towers, just so everything has the exact same carpet as the floor inside. But again, very utilitarian, because I like having a cooler with our beverages, some tools, a little bit of cleaning supplies, and a chair or two. And the beauty of this is there's plenty of room back there because it comes all the way to here. I don't want to open it right now, it looks that bad. But there's plenty of room to carry everything. and I just want to have it respectable looking. I'll probably do Dynamat and all that back there too.
Yep.
With just some access panels to the tail lights to fidget with them, and the panel to the battery, as I said. But that's really all that's on my radar currently. Otherwise, nothing comes to mind. Over the years, 20 different times I've thought of different engine swaps, but to be honest, I could double or triple the power easily if I spend enough money and time, naturally. But that led me into a different purchase that I decided to do instead.
Which would be that. Okay, so in lieu of an engine swap or another engine swap in the Mark I, what'd you end up with?
Right, so the choice was an engine swap. I shouldn't say a choice, it just kind of evolved into the perpetual engine swap. And instead I decided I could put that money to much better use and just get a whole different car instead. So for less money than the drivetrain, I purchased this car from my good friend Scott. And it has a great story with it. It was from a guy on Vortex named Nick in Boston, and I used to follow it about 20 years ago. I didn't know him, but I remember the car. And he eventually moved away to Texas, and it sat in his mom's garage for 12 or 13 years till 2018, I believe, is when Scott got it and almost immediately sold it to me. And so it's all original paint, which was a big deal. And these 91, 92 GTI 16 valves, they only made 5,000 of them, and we only got them in North America. Europe never got this car with the 2-liter 16 valve. They only had 1.8 16 valves. So this was a special car, and just like a lot of things, their values have skyrocketed, especially because most of them have been VR swapped or something. So this is an OG 16 valve with working AC. That was actually the most time put into it, was putting the AC back in, getting it functioning, which comes in very handy. Again, it's single stage red. This is all original. It does have plenty of beauty marks, but once a year I give it a once over and freshen it up. Same with the trim. The only mods are the suspension, just some H&R coilovers and the BBS wheels. Period correct 17 by 7.5 with some 205 40s. With the red center caps, I thought that was tasteful. It does have a larger intake manifold. We'll just show under the hood. It's nothing special, but again, just trying to keep it original. So I put in the larger intake manifold stock. These are 42 millimeter runners. This is a 50 millimeter, so you get a lot more airflow. And I messed around with Everbright coating because I hate paint on silver. Silver paint looks like silver paint, so I wanted it to look pretty original. Yes, it does have aftermarket Tektronix plug wires, but it has that and a 1.8 intake cam, I believe, and a Tektronix stainless exhaust with a Borla. Other than that, everything here is original, everything works. At the time, this was their flagship Mark II. The lights are relayed. Okay, I guess that's a modification. They have fog lights. It runs fantastic, drives great. I find myself using this tremendously more than the other car. These are cool. The inside has these velour Recaros and seats. Again, this is all original except the headliner. Scott and I redid the headliner. Very proud of our efforts on that as well. Become a headliner freak. It does have the Votex console and Euro underdash trays instead of the so-called knee bar. Again, those are easily changeable back to swap. I can change those in 45 minutes, and those are just sitting in the basement. So if someone wanted to buy this in its original form, everything is very easily reversible. But with that all in mind, it's a fantastic car. It drives great on the highway, back roads. I've driven it many, many hours, carefree. It's just a very enjoyable car to drive.
Yeah. So you're quite happy with your decision to...
I'm much happier purchasing this car, and I also went through the whole fuel system because it sat so long, CIS, You get awful varnish, so it has all new fuel pump lines, all the injectors, all that stuff. Once it drives and runs fantastic. It runs really, really well as a 31-year-old car could run. It has ample power, plenty of power. Again, it's not some turbo monster, but it has ample power and it gets the job done. So very pleased with it. Enjoy it much more so to use than the green car, just because it's much closer to stock. It hasn't been over modified. It's how it came from the factory. And it's not as nice on the outside, and I don't have anxiety driving the green car, but this one is more carefree, so to speak.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does.
Because anyone that knows me knows if I get in something, I pound the piss out of it. But this car it's much more refined than the other car. In the 10 years between the two, they came a long way. And again, this was kind of the flagship car then with all the bells and whistles. So that kind of explains that, if that makes any sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. And it's good to see you have something that you can just get in and enjoy. And again, like you said, you don't have anxiety about the green car, but I'm sorry, silver car, but this is just a little bit easier.
Yeah, like Danielle will drive this sometimes. It's very easy to drive. Anyone that knows how to drive a stick can get in and drive it. It has power steering, AC. Again, nothing's been cut, chopped, or modified with that.
Yep.
It drives the way it did new. Again, it doesn't have any of the amenities of a modern car, but it still drives very well versus the other car. You got to be a lot more touchy with how to use it.
Yep. And one thing that surprised me that you've done over the past year, I'd say, or yeah, within the past year, is you bought a Mark 7R for your daily, which I never would have imagined.
I can't believe I did that, yeah. Yeah, because my wife, Danielle, had gotten a Mark 7 GTI, and I had a Mark 4 TDI wagon, which even that kind of felt like a sellout to me, getting a car that new. But I drive a lot for work, and it served its purpose for many years and a bazillion miles. And I liked her car so much, I was looking at them, and it quickly escalated from a GTI to an R, because if I bought a GTI, I would want to do a long checklist of modifications, but the R already has everything, so that was our agreement.
Yep.
Was that I purchased the car and leave it as is. Now 6 months in, I'm pleased. There's nothing I want to even do to it. I just like driving it, doing the maintenance. Very pleased with it, right out of the box. It's the first car I've ever had that I don't mind out of the box.
Could you see yourself ever driving something other than a Volkswagen or potentially an Audi?
I have had Audi 4000 Quattros a long time ago in Vermont, but no, nothing else that I get in gives me any justification. A friend of ours got a Tesla Model 3, and I went around with him in it. It's cool. That's a dramatic example, but just there's no connectivity to the road in it because it's electric. It feels very autonomous.
Yep.
Yes, you could say that the Mark 7 is that way in a sense, but the sound and the feel of the gasoline engine.
There's still a bit
This isn't an anti-electric rant, by the way. It just happens to be what came to mind.
Yeah, yeah.
When I get in other cars, I don't get that same aura or feel. I just have never deviated from the Volkswagen Audi group in over 70 cars, and I don't see it ever happening.
And like you said, so you've been committed beyond the 21 years of ownership of Mark 1.
Absolutely. At one point I went through a lot of Mark IIs. Mark IIs have actually always been my primary thing. Just that's the car that people would know me for.
Right, right.
But I've had well over 50 Mark IIs.
Oh yeah, the Jetta Coupe, I forgot about that too.
Yeah, so I've had a lot of Mark IIs. Way before I met you, I went through they were a lot of ship boxes, but I had a lot of Mark IIs. So that's always been the most Lego-oriented. It has enough tech to be reliable, but it's antiquated enough that you can put it together with some basic spanners.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You can kind of fuss with it with ease.
Easy to fuss with, cheap and easy to fix.
Yeah.
Well,
it was.
maybe not now,
yeah,
but it
it's
was
changing.
when they were in their heyday. So I've just never deviated from it. It's like a horse with blinders. Call me simple, but just nothing gives that feel. I have friends that love these cars, and they've gotten a Porsche GT3 or something like that, for instance, and they sold it almost immediately and went back to these economy ship boxes. Something about them, I don't have the words, even though I'm a yapper, I don't have the words to describe that feel that it gives you.
Just some otherworldly
Yeah, there's some connection, the smell, the feel. Even if it was a stock diesel, 60 horsepower, flat seat, 1985 Jetta Mark II, it just gives you that feel.
There'd be something to it.
Euphoric feel. But again, that's me. I don't expect others to feel that way. But those of you who understand that would understand it.
Well, I think that's a good place to end. Toby, thank you for showing us a couple of your cars. And I thoroughly enjoy your thorough way of approaching cars, and just watching you do the Dynamat stuff over the past year, and then the wheels before that, and then, you know, countless things before that. It's always entertaining to watch and see you take time and put effort into things like this.
Well, thank you, Josh. I highly appreciate that. You're one of my best friends. I'm very happy to see this revival thing going well. I hope everyone watches these videos. Maybe not this one. This one's a waste of time. But watch all the other ones in general. Josh does a great job. Follow along. Check out all his stuff. Check out his podcast. I'm pumping him up right now. He didn't ask me to do this. Check out his podcast. Buy his merch. Go to his donut meets. Support the man. He makes a great magazine, quarterly, semi-annually,
yeah,
whenever. There's no timetable, but just go with it. Check it out. Thank you, Josh.